picture this. You're sitting in a dimly lit room, watching the final devastating act of a movie. Or maybe you just received a piece of heavy news. Or perhaps you've just stubbed your toe on the exact same piece of furniture for the third time this week. Without you making a conscious decision, a very specific, very strange biological sequence begins. Your throat tightens, your breathing hitches, and then, slowly, a salty, water-based fluid begins to well up in your eyes, eventually spilling over your eyelids and tracing tracks down your cheeks. You are crying. It feels entirely normal to you. It is a universal, everyday human experience.
But if you actually stop and zoom out to look at the rest of the animal kingdom, what you are doing in that moment makes absolutely no sense. If a dog breaks its leg, it whimpers. If a lion cub is separated from its mother, it cries out. Even our closest genetic relatives, chimpanzees and bonobos, will scream, sulk, and show visible signs of deep distress or mourning. But they do not leak water from their eyes. Out of the roughly 8.7 million species sharing this planet with us, you are the only one that weeps in response to an internal emotional state. So why us? Why did humans, and humans alone, evolve this incredibly specific, inherently messy biological quirk? Before we get into the biology, let's clear up a common, very understandable misconception. The premise here isn't that animals don't have tears. They do. In fact, pretty much every vertebrate with eyes that lives on land produces tears, but not all tears are created equal. Biologically speaking, there are 3 distinct types of tears, and the first 2 are strictly utilitarian.
The first type are called basal tears. These are the unsung heroes of your ocular system. They are a constant, microscopic shield of fluid that washes over your cornea every single time you blink, keeping your eyes lubricated and protected from dust. Without basal tears, your eyes would rapidly dry out, invite infection, and you would go blind. Every terrestrial animal with eyes has basal tears. Your cat has them, horses have them, crocodiles have them. The second type are reflex tears. These are the emergency flush system. When you chop an onion and the sulfur compounds hit your eye, or when you walk through a thick cloud of smoke, your tear glands instantly flood your eyes with a massive volume of fluid to physically wash the irritant out. Again, animals have these. If a dog gets a speck of dirt in its eye, it will tear up. But then we get to the third type, emotional tears. The tears triggered not by dust or onions, but by grief, joy, frustration, or profound relief. This third category belongs entirely, exclusively to us. And once you start looking at the actual chemistry of what's inside these emotional tears, you realize just how weird this whole system really is. Here's where things get genuinely fascinating. Because for a long time, scientists assumed that a tear was simply a tear, salt, water, and mucus. But in the 1980s, researchers decided to actually test this. They collected reflex tears from people who were chopping onions and emotional tears from people who were watching sad movies, and they put them under a microscope. It turns out they aren't the same fluid at all. Emotional tears are chemically distinct. When you cry from emotion, your tears contain significantly higher levels of certain proteins. More importantly, they contain high concentrations of stress hormones. Specifically, they contain a hormone called adrenocorticotropic hormone, or ACTH. This is a chemical heavily involved in your body's panic and stress response. Emotional tears also contain a chemical called leucine and enkephalin, which is an endorphin, essentially a natural painkiller produced by your own brain. Think about what this actually means. When you are emotionally overwhelmed, your body isn't just producing water to visually show people you're sad. Your tear ducts are literally acting as an excretory system for stress. You are physically flushing excess stress hormones out of your body through your eyes, while simultaneously dosing yourself with a mild, natural painkiller. This is why you genuinely, physiologically feel better after a good hard cry. Your body has literally purged the chemistry of anxiety and self-medicated the pain. You aren't just crying, you are venting chemistry.
Let's look at the actual wiring that makes this happen. To understand how a feeling turns into a physical fluid, you have to look deep inside the brain, specifically at a region called the limbic system. This is essentially the emotional processing center of your brain. It's the ancient hardware responsible for your deepest, most primal feelings: fear, anger, intense joy, and profound sadness. A structure here called the hypothalamus acts as the bridge between your nervous system and your endocrine system. When you experience a massive surge of emotion, your limbic system lights up like a switchboard. It signals your hypothalamus, which then sends an urgent neurological message down a specific pathway to your autonomic nervous system. This is the system that controls things you don't actively think about, like your heart rate. It has two main branches, the sympathetic, which acts as the gas pedal for fight or flight, and the parasympathetic, which acts as the brakes, responsible for resting and recovering. Here is the brilliant counterintuitive trick of human crying. Crying actually engages the parasympathetic nervous system. That signal from your limbic system travels all the way to the lacrimal glands, the almond-shaped glands tucked just above your eyes. These glands are told to suddenly ramp up production, pumping out that specialized hormone-laced fluid. As the tears overflow, your parasympathetic system kicks into high gear, forcing your body to slow down, lowering your heart rate, and bringing you out of a state of panic. Crying is your brain's emergency manual override to force your body to calm down.
But this brings us to a massive evolutionary paradox. Evolution is usually brutally practical. Every biological feature costs energy and is subjected to the ruthless filter of natural selection. If a trait makes you more likely to be eaten, it gets filtered out of the gene pool very quickly. And from a pure survival standpoint, crying is a terrible strategy. Think about what crying actually does to your physical body. It blurs your vision, making it incredibly difficult to spot approaching threats or plan an escape route. It often causes your nose to run and congestion to build, hindering your ability to breathe efficiently or smell danger. It causes vocal hitching and sobbing, which makes uncontrollable noise. In the wild, signaling that you are in pain, visually impaired, and thoroughly distracted is basically ringing a dinner bell for apex predators. Predators look for the weak, the injured, the isolated. An animal that loudly and visibly broadcasts its vulnerability gets eaten. This is exactly why almost every other animal on Earth hides its pain. If a horse is sick, it pretends it's entirely fine until it literally cannot stand up. If a wild dog is injured, it retreats, hides in the brush, and gets dead quiet. Showing weakness in nature is a death sentence.
So, why on earth did human ancestors evolve a highly visible, physically disabling distress signal that practically advertises our vulnerability to the entire savanna? The answer to that question reveals a fundamental shift in how humans survived compared to every other animal. For humans, the survival game completely changed. We didn't survive because we had the sharpest claws, or the thickest hide, or the fastest sprint speed. We are, physically speaking, incredibly weak, slow, and fragile primates. We survived because of one very specific superpower: extreme social cohesion. We survived because we took care of each other. In a highly cooperative social species, communicating your internal state to the rest of the tribe is actually far more important than hiding your weaknesses from predators. Early humans lived in incredibly tight-knit bands, entirely dependent on each other for hunting, foraging, and defense. If you were sick, injured, or emotionally devastated, the absolute worst thing you could do was hide it from the group. You needed a way to signal for help. But here is the wrinkle. Why not just scream? Screaming is a fantastic way to say, "I need help right now," but screaming is also high risk. A loud vocal distress call travels for miles. It alerts your tribe, yes, but it also alerts every leopard and hyena in the tri-state area. Emotional crying, on the other hand, is an evolutionary masterpiece of localized signaling. It is a high-bandwidth, close-range distress beacon. Tears provide an unmistakable visual cue to anyone looking directly at your face, signaling deep vulnerability and an immediate need for support, empathy, and protection. But importantly, they do this silently. You can cry without making a single sound. You can visually alert the tribe members sitting next to the fire that you are in profound crisis, without alerting the predators lurking in the dark just beyond the tree line. It is a secure, encrypted emotional transmission. You never see it coming, but it works instantly. Now, let's talk about the dark side of this mechanism, because this is where things get genuinely unsettling. If emotional crying is a deeply ingrained evolutionary cheat code that instantly elicits empathy and support from the humans around you, it is only a matter of time that that system gets hijacked. Because we are a hyper-intelligent, socially complex species, we eventually learned how to weaponize our own biology. We can fake it.
This is a behavioral phenomenon unique to us. You will rarely see an animal fake an injury purely for psychological manipulation. Humans, however, have mastered the art of the manufactured tear. Actors trained for years to consciously trigger the exact parasympathetic responses required to produce real, saline tears on command. But far more insidiously, sociopaths, manipulators, and even toddlers learn very early on that crying is a tool. It is a biological override button for other people's logic. When you see someone cry, your own mirror neurons fire. You feel an intense, almost involuntary biological urge to comfort them, to drop your defenses, to forgive them. Faking tears allows a person to bypass your rational, critical thinking and hack directly into your evolutionary empathy programming. It is a staggering exploitation of our species' greatest survival mechanism. When the system is broken, it reveals just how powerful the system actually is. Let's pull back from the unsettling stuff for a moment and look at something equally strange. Why do we cry when we are incredibly happy? This trips people up constantly. If crying is a distress signal, a mechanism to purge stress hormones and beg for tribal support, why do tears stream down your face when you win the lottery, or when you watch someone you love succeed, or when you are laughing so hard you can barely breathe?
Researchers studying this have found that the brain's emotional processing centers don't actually do a great job of distinguishing between incredibly high levels of positive emotion and incredibly high levels of negative emotion. To your hypothalamus, massive neural overload is simply massive neural overload. Extreme joy and extreme grief both create a state of high physiological arousal. The body loses its state of stable equilibrium. Remember earlier when we talked about crying being a manual override to engage the parasympathetic nervous system and force the body to calm down? That exact same mechanism applies to extreme joy. When you are so happy that your heart is racing, your breathing is erratic, and your brain is flooded with chemical signals, your body essentially registers this as a system overload. It hits the exact same emergency release valve. The tears flow, the parasympathetic system kicks in, and the body is forced to regulate itself back to a stable baseline. Whether the engine is overheating from stress or overheating from pure ecstasy, the cooling system is exactly the same. The fluid is exactly the same.